Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Christina Nushoff. I also go by Kay. I'm the CEO of WomenGrow. And we're here for a very, very exciting evening. So first, I would like to introduce the founding chairwoman of the DC market. She started in 2015. Layla Macklin. She is currently the operations manager at New Frontier Data and also the advocacy chair for the National Cannabis Festival. But Layla?
Thank you so much, Kay. I'm absolutely over the moon to be here. I started this chapter in April of 2015, and I had no clue what I was doing. I knew a few things. One, the war on drugs was a crime. Two, there was an opportunity to build an entire new industry from the ground up, rooted in compassion for humanity and also our only home, the earth. An opportunity to build an industry that was dominated by people of color, by women, by the LGBTQ community. And maybe not most importantly, but pretty important, I loved cannabis. Of course, as with anything, it takes a village, and I truly would not have been able to do this without the support of many, many people. So bear with me, it's a fairly long list. First of all, I want to thank former co-chairs of the DC chapter, Vic Tetri, and specifically Jessica Carty, who dealt with me the longest while I was dealing with the trials and tribulations of being young and a manager and managing a small organization. Thank you, Jessica. Also, if I say your name, please raise your hand so you can get some recognition, Jessica. A few friends and supportive businesses that have come to virtually every Women Grow meeting. Minna at Kettle Tea Company, Kyla at Get Hemp Butter, and Harrison at Daily High Club. And there are also a few advisors, much wiser and probably a little older than me as well. Patrice Engel at Steep Hill, Safira Galoob at the Liaison Group. I know you're here, so yeah, raise your hand. Rose Donna of the Wonderland Ballroom. Jennifer Culpepper of Brand Joint, nice. And my new boss, of course, Giada De Carcer at New Frontier Data. Thank you so much for your guidance and support over these past couple of years. A few more, Stephanie Lagarda, Emily Salmon St. Pierre, and Lily Davis for consistently, I know two of you are here, raise your hands, yeah. For consistently volunteering at our meetings and being incredibly supportive. And then the last three are my mom. My mom has heard me come out of many closets. The first one was when I was 13, and she looked at me and said, "Layla, are you gay?" And I said, "I don't know, I think so." And she was like, "It's okay, I've known since you were 3. And then, of course, the green closet when I was 16, and I told her I was interested in consuming either alcohol or cannabis, and she was adamant that if I were to try something, that cannabis should be what I try because it is much safer. And then, of course, coming out of the green closet and actually diving deep into the cannabis industry, I can only hope and dream that people have a mother as loving and caring as my own. Second to last, Caroline Phillips, who, I'm going to look right at her as I say this, came to one of the first Women Grow meetings ever, and she took me under her wing completely, and any big decision that was made for this chapter did not happen without her advice and guidance. She has a natural ability to bring folks together with in the cannabis space and beyond. I'm so incredibly grateful for you, Caroline. Thank you so much. And then last but not least, the reason that we're all able to be here today is because Dr. Chanda Macias picked up this market and is going to turn it into her own. Chanda was also one of the very first attendees of the Women Grow meetings and has been nothing but supportive since the moment she arrived. Chanda is the owner of National Holistic Healing Center and medical marijuana dispensary here in DC, formerly the STEM director at Howard University, also a global philanthropist, providing education and resources to those around the world that need it most. I could not be more grateful and honored to introduce the new market leader for the DC market, Dr. Chanda Macias.
Wow, that was kind of moving for me. I am humbled to be here today and to conduct the first Women Grow meeting under my leadership. I am so excited, but I am humbled to be a part of this group. And you know, what Women Grow has done for our community, our minority-based community, our women-based community has been unbelievable in the DC market. And because I am a two-time Howard graduate and worked here for many years, of course, where else would I have the first meeting in honor of CBC Week here, to honor us and what our contributions have been to the cannabis industry. So let's give ourselves a round of applause. So briefly, I just want to talk about my journey to this space and why Women Grow has been the vehicle for me. I started here as an undergraduate student studying breast cancer as a student, and then my graduate studies progressed to prostate cancer metastasis to bone. And in all these studies that I've conducted, what I realized that a viable treatment plan was cannabis. And yet we didn't know why people chose the medicine that they did. But we recognized, especially in minority communities, that didn't have access to health care, or there was a healthcare disparity, they would self-medicate. And self-medication of choice was cannabis. So this sparked inside of me for years and years, and I did enter corporate America. But because we all know we have a calling and a passion, sometimes you have to adhere to it. I finished my MBA in supply chain management at Rutgers University, and I asked my husband, because I have 4 children as well, is it okay if I enter this space? And he said, who's going to watch those kids if you get locked up? I said, of course you would. Who else would do it? So first of all, I want to recognize my wonderful husband over there. Michael, raise your hand. For being able to support me in this endeavor. This has been a journey for me as a minority woman. And I say that because when I wrote the application, it was the most grueling process I've ever been through. I've wrote a PhD dissertation. I've done mounts and mounts of work. I've written NSF grants, NIH grants. But when it came down to writing an application for medical marijuana, it was the biggest challenge of my life. And what happened 2 years later, I was awarded. But in that, once I was awarded, I still faced barriers. I went to my suppliers and I said, we have 10 legal growers in Washington, D.C. And I asked them for supplies so I can actually operate my dispensary. And what in return, no one would give me supply except for the only black grower in this program. And at the time district growers was supplying their own dispensary, and therefore he could only give me 2 strains to start this business. And we were like, how are we going to succeed? We were the last to open in Washington, D.C., but let me tell you today, we stand as number 1. And the reason we did that is because we started to affiliate with our community partners. So in this room, the success of National Holistic Healing Center being in a dispensary did not come from me alone. And everyone knows what those contributions were. We sat back and focused on our strategy, which is one, in order to get our suppliers to give us the supply we needed for our patient base, is that we had to grow our patient base. Based upon that, we teamed up with CanEx, Chanda Green, and she recruited patients diligently into our program by educating them on the benefits of medical marijuana. She helped them bridge them to the doctor's office to be evaluated, and then had them come to us to develop a treatment plan for them. Not only with that, our patient base grew, but after that, then our suppliers started to see that we were having deeper purchases with that one grower. So then one other grower came to us and said, if you buy 10 strains at $6,500 a pound, I will sell to you. So thank you again, husband, for letting me second mortgage our house. And so again, the challenges of a Black woman in this industry. After that, we saw that our patients had deeper purchases. We were thriving. We had more and more success in our education platform. And then I said it's time to reach back into the community. And I had no idea how to work this space. So that's when I came to my first Women Grow event. And I said, Layla, can you help me? And at my first festival for outreach, purely based upon education, because as you know that the laws in Washington, D.C., as well as in the rest of the cannabis space, will not allow you to market, to sell a product, but you can educate in that space. Layla came to my table. She showed me what to do, how to talk to people in the community, and she was there at my first event. So I say that the reason I'm willing to take and grow this right now is because of what Layla gave me to give back to my community, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you. And with that being said, I would like Kay to come up. And we'd like to present to Layla a plaque. Come on. Well, on behalf of Women Grow, the DC chapter, as well as national headquarters, we would like to present this plaque to you for your outstanding contribution to this organization. Thank you so much. Thank you again. So I think you're all ready to start this conversation. It's going to be very intriguing today, and we have some outstanding guests. But before we go on to that, I would like to acknowledge our sponsor of this event. It's the NCF, the National Cannabis Festival, which occurs every year for 420. It's a big celebration. And the CEO, Caroline Phillips, another outstanding minority in this community that is doing amazing things. Caroline?
Good evening, everybody. So I'm Caroline Phillips. I am the founder and chief executive officer of National Cannabis Festival. And some of you may be wondering why another event is sponsoring an event And if it's not obvious already from the women that you've heard tonight, I'm going to let you know why it was very important for me to be here tonight. A lot of people don't know that National Cannabis Festival is in fact a woman and minority-owned event. There aren't a lot of women in the music space. There certainly aren't a lot in the music festival space. And I ask you to go out there and check the Cannabis Music Festival space. It's a lonely room. So for me, I know that my festival wouldn't exist, literally wouldn't exist without WomenGrow. WomenGrow and organizations like WomenGrow are critical to every industry, so I'm very fortunate that in the birth of the cannabis industry, we have an organization like this where we can gather. The second reason is that WomenGrow shares a mission with National Cannabis Festival. The festival was founded because I saw, and a lot of my colleagues in this room, like Scott Cecil with Students for Sensible Drug Policy, Layla, who of course founded the DC market for WomenGrow. But we saw that there were a lot of things coming to DC, a lot of conferences where you could network or get education, but those conferences were far too expensive for most people to attend. The bar of entry was too high, just to the point where you're trying to gather information. So we decided to come together and put on an event like National Cannabis Festival, where we keep the ticket prices very low, where we provide a lot of education and a lot of access. So we're going into our third year this year, and we're proud, just like WomenGrow, to be promoting a platform that encourages diversity and encourages a more equitable industry. And then finally, the reason that I'm here tonight and that National Cannabis Festival is so proud to sponsor this event is, well, of course, Chanda and Layla. Layla, you are more than a mentee to me and to our team. You are like a little sister that I'm honestly not worthy of having. Every day, Layla makes me want to be better, partially because I get emails from her that ask me where stuff is, and partially because it's a true pleasure to work with someone who listens and then uses the information that you give them to advance themselves and the people around them. So thank you for everything, Layla. And then of course, Chanda. Chanda, you are a beacon of optimism and light and positivity in a really exciting space. You're someone who I've enjoyed working with and who I go to when I have questions about how I should proceed. And I don't think that I could be more proud to see you carrying forward a torch that Layla helped to light. So I'm gonna get down before I cry because you made that happen already. Thank you all so much for starting this amazing chapter and keeping it going, and thank you all for being here.
So I am excited to introduce our moderator for tonight, Ms. Gia Moran, who is from New York, but she's also the market director for the communications director for WomenGrow, and she'll be introducing the panelists and has some very good questions for us tonight. Gia?
I like to liven the spot. So, hi everyone, how are you? Welcome, welcome. My name is Gia Marone. I am the Director of Communications for WomenGrow. In addition to that, I am also the founder and CEO of my own company, GVM Communications. I state that because there's always more than one opportunity in this space. And so I just wanted to put that out there in case you're thinking, well, I already got one job. Well, what about two? I got three. That said, I want to bring the panel up. And what's great about tonight, I feel like there's an echo. Is this on? Yeah. Oh, okay. We already started talking already. We were on a panel earlier today, half of us. And so we sort of did our roundtable already. So we're ready, we're hot, and we're coming to bring you some gems. And hopefully you guys get something out of it. Just quick show of hands. Are there like very, very new people to the cannabis space here tonight? Like no vice, never been, never touched it, never? Okay, all right, maybe that was too far. But is there anyone that doesn't have a cannabis business that's here that said, oh, this is interesting and I want to learn? Okay, all right, good, good, good. Okay. I had you guys in mind when I was writing up some of the questions, so I just wanted to know. And then clearly the rest are experienced, intermediate to advanced. I love that. So that means that our conversation tonight will be very engaging. So I'd like to bring up Chanda, whom we've already met already. Chanda Macias. Next is, well, that's Dr. Chanda Macias. Let me respect the titles because it's well earned. Next is Dr. Rachel Knotts. And I'm actually going to call up one of the gentlemen. We've got two on the panel tonight. Sterling Crockett, please join us. And Shantae Green, who is speaking, but she's coming up right now. And last to bring up the end is Mr. Marvin Washington. Now, I think some people know you all, but we're going to have this more like a casual conversation, not so formal. I feel like we're friends. I feel like I know you already. So with that said, and I feel like you guys are paparazzi, because when those cameras come up, I'm like, yeah, they are superstars. And with that said, they are, right? Because these are our industry leaders. These are people who are making decisions, who are brokering partnerships and business deals. And for those who are new, intermediate, or advanced in this space, there's always something else to learn. And there's always something else to take away from someone else's experiences, background, and opportunities. With that said, I'm going to actually start at the end and work my way back this way. So Mr. Marvin Washington, who's a former NFL player and now a cannabis entrepreneur, if you can just give us a little bit of background about what you're doing in this space.
Okay, hi everybody, and thanks for coming out. I'm an entrepreneur in this space and also an advocate for people of color and making sure that we have a level playing field. And I got into space about 5 years ago as a spokesman for a company, a medical cannabis company, and that's the last time I was going to be a spokesman and be a paid entertainer. Everything else that I've since done the research and learned about this plant, this whole plant. I'm a partner in 5 different cannabis companies, either partner or major shareholder in them. There are 12 different verticals in the space, so you don't have to grow it or sell it to be in here. And I think this can solve some of the issues that are facing this nation as far as the opiate addiction, and also change the economic solution or situation for our communities. And I just want to tell everybody, this is the first time here, learn as much as you can. Whatever you're doing in general society, it can come over to this side, because I think the 5 biggest or fastest growing spaces, spaces in this industry are real estate, packaging, branding, marketing, and security. And so that has nothing to do with the plant. So like I say, you don't have to sell it, you don't have to grow it. It's a wonderful space to be in, because I call it a space. We're not an industry yet, because we're not going to regulate it. We're a space and we're a movement. We're going to get there. And this is just part of it, educating people about the whole cannabis plant. So I thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you, Marvin. And next is Ms. Shantae Green, founder of MyCanX and a consultant in the space.
Thank you all for coming out. As Gia said, I am the founder of MyCanX. What MyCanX does is patient registration, and that was my very first business in the cannabis space. MyCanX is now doing patient registration as well as consulting. I'm partnering with some of the other ladies on this panel on some business ventures. My company has written winning dispensary applications along with some of my partners. We have a total of five winning applications, 3 of which were in Maryland. We're currently working on an application in my home, Columbus, Ohio. The one thing that's really important to me is to really make sure people understand that there are barriers to this industry, and most of those barriers are to cultivating and dispensing. We talked about this on another panel today. Everybody's concerned about the finances involved. I really started my first business as with patient registration in my kitchen, and I don't even remember if I put $20 down. It cost me the fee to register the business, make business cards, and then everything else I did, it was just legwork, building my network of physicians, getting out there marketing to bring patients in. So when you think that, there are all these barriers to entry, having felonies and things like that, think about the ancillary services that support the business, because that is what I have done very successfully. And as a person who started an ancillary business, my business made close to $1 million the very first year. And I didn't have the tax burdens of the dispensaries or the cultivators. And I have made more than double that in the next 2 years. And as a consultant, I'm paid really, really well just for working on applications. So there are so many other opportunities in this space that don't include touching the plant. So that's something that everyone who's interested in this industry needs to think about.
Thank you. And next is Sterling Crockett of Maryland.
Good evening, everyone. I am the founder and managing partner of Agromed Industries. Yeah, Agromed. So my journey with medical cannabis started a little over 6 years ago, when 2 days after becoming a grandfather, my daughter was diagnosed with kidney cancer. And she ultimately had her kidney removed and went through 16 weeks of chemotherapy. And it was in week 2, 3, she was having a really, really tough time. And her physician shared with us that he had patients that were using cannabis, and the reports that he was receiving back were overwhelmingly positive. And so we were able to get a cannabis tincture, and immediately it helped to relieve her symptoms. And she had the energy to bond with her newborn daughter. And today, I think 2 weeks ago, my granddaughter started first grade, and my daughter hasn't showed any new tumors for 6 years. And so, it was that experience. At that time, I had been a small business entrepreneur for 25 years. I had grown companies in the construction space. I had grown another company in the defense contracting space. And the whole experience, it angered me that there were people suffering unnecessarily. And this was a fairly inexpensive and safe alternative. And I wanted to be a part of it. And so that was the seed for Agromed. On June 20th, Agromed was awarded a grow processor license in Pennsylvania. Of the 12 companies that received licenses, our company scored the highest score, 790.44. And in Pennsylvania, I think because of the conditions they addressed, and as a result, there was also another black-owned company that was awarded a grow processor license, and Dore from Alera Healthcare is sitting in the back. So Agromed is a fully integrated business. We're involved in the cultivation, processing, manufacturing into treatments, and we also own dispensaries. So thanks for coming, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you. And next is Dr. Rachel Knox, who I had the pleasure of meeting today. And Dr. Rachel Knox is with the American Cannabinoid Clinics.
Yes, so myself, along with my mom, dad, and sister, who are all MDs, I am the co-founder of the American Cannabinoid Clinics, where we specialize in integrative cannabinoid medicine. We are not the quintessential cannabis pot doc card mill. We counsel patients in the intentional use of cannabis to treat targeted disease processes and illness. Our goal in the space is to be standard setters. We want to be the standard for clinical cannabinoid medicine. To that end, I am partnering with lovely women on this panel to bring a standardization to educating clinicians, so medical doctors, nurses, other allied health professionals, and the like. And the reason we're doing that is because we want to leverage the expertise in my clinics. The doctors in my clinic, my family, we are the leading experts in our country in integrative cannabinoid medicine. We are setting the bar high, and we are going to be coming here to the local area and to Maryland probably within the next 6 months to a year to provide our clinical services here. I'm also the medical chair of the Minority Cannabis Business Association, and our goal is to bring consumer and patient awareness of cannabis as a viable alternative, if not a first-line option, to communities of color. I don't think it's lost on anybody in this room that the healthcare disparity gap that exists between blacks and whites is large, right? People of color are twice as likely to get diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, cancer, and we're twice as likely to die from those conditions. Well, we have medicine in cannabis that can take the place of a lot of our common prescription drugs that are really just managing chronic illnesses until we die anyways. We can really get in there and start chipping away at a lot of these prescription drugs and really start to talk about healing with cannabis as medicine. So our goal at our clinics is really to embrace cannabis, but also natural therapies that work on the endocannabinoid system. How many of you know what the endocannabinoid system is? We're going to delve into that. Good. To provide a solution to our healthcare crisis.
Thank you so much. And last but not least is Dr. Chanda Macias. And he gave us a little bit about your journey. But if you can talk a little bit more about your dispensary, because I had the pleasure of visiting, so I was very excited with a lot of questions. So if you can talk a little bit about your dispensary.
Definitely. So when a patient goes and visits Dr. Knox and they're evaluated based on a condition that they may have, then they come into the dispensary and I develop a treatment plan for them. So our treatment plan consists of two things. One is my chemical engineer in-house right now. Andy, where are you? Andy Hytine is a member of our group. He is a chemical engineer from Howard University, and yeah, you know? And he actually analyzes the medicine, as you know, a little bit more in depth. So what happens is that when a grower grows it, by standardized DOH, Department of Health protocol, they're only required to test certain cannabinoids. But at National Holistic Healing Center, what we do is raise the bar and have personal leadership and analyze each strain based upon the benefits that they can provide the patient. So once Andy does his initial analysis, he gives it to me and I pair it with the ailment. So the ailments in DC are any condition or any strain. So what I just described to you is ailment strain alignment. So if you have an ailment, I have a strain for you. And we have that with over 60 strains in-house, but a total of over 150 products. So what we do is then analyze your treatment plan over time to see how you're progressing, if you're receiving the benefits that you were looking for, and number one, your life is improved. Your quality of life is improved so that you can, in fact, do the things that you weren't able to do before, like sleep 8 hours at night. Insomnia is one of our number one issues. So with that, this is how we work together. We build the team. I'm very impressed with the products, the medication we have. The other products that you have are just fascinating. And you know what? We are the leaders, the minority leaders in cannabis, and we make cannabis look good. How about that?
And that's a great segue, because I think it's no secret, right? From Wall Street to Silicon Valley, minorities have been pretty medicinal in the space. And we're seeing that on the early onset in the cannabis space. What I commend us, as well as many people in this room and across the country, is that we're calling it out early, right? Whereas you're looking at industries like technology that are addressing the lack of representation years later and saying, we need to do better. We're starting out saying, no, you're going to do better, right? And I think that this conversation, I hope, in addition to the topic of diversity, which we talked about a little bit earlier in our pre-panel, I said, I hope in 5 years we're not talking about diversity. I hope we're in action of diversity. Because I don't need to talk about, as a woman of color, that we need to see more of us. No. Let's get hired, let's build our businesses, let's move forward. The only obstacles outside of the licensing, but on the ancillary side, are ourselves. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. But Sterling, you actually mentioned something, and it wasn't in the questions that I sent ahead of time, so just bear with me. But for those that are not aware of the scoring, because you said you scored well, but there's someone here who doesn't understand that. If you can just touch upon that.
Okay, in the Pennsylvania process, there were various sections on the application. Your business experience and capacity to operate, your plan for growing your operation. You were scored on packaging and labeling, diversity and affirmative action, as well as community impact. And a perfect score would have been 1,000. And so the top 12 scores range from our 790.44 and I think to about 702. So Pennsylvania also happened to be the most competitive state process to play out to date. There were 177 competitors. Now, I was originally very attracted and very enthusiastic about Pennsylvania, because I thought that with the governor's leadership, Governor Wolf, they had kind of put together a scoring system that would consider diversity and community impact without sacrificing qualifications. You know, a lot of times when we break through, we wear that label, well, they only got through because they're the black company, right. You know, they got the extra points. And I have to share this with you, shame on me too, because my business partner and I were together in New York, and we were watching the announcements on the phone. And we realized we won. And then we realized we had the high score. And we said to ourselves, like, wow, we must have nailed the diversity and affirmative action section. It was actually one of the lowest scoring sections for us on the application. We actually won for our business experience and capacity to operate, and rightfully so. Our team had over 200 years of business experience. We had on hand 6 times the minimum capital requirement, and we were very, very proud. Our highest scoring section on the application was the packaging and labeling, where we earned 97.4% of the points. So in the end, you know, what this all said to me was this whole diversity affirmative action issue and bad metrics and so forth that we see, outcomes that we see in this industry, have more to do with the situation, not the people.
Right. Thank you. And so with that said, what I'd like to do is really start at the end with Marvin, because it's easier for the microphone to come back this way. But many of us know that with 2 things. One, I hope you're taking notes, using your phone, recording, whatever. There's some good information here. The reason why I say this every time I moderate, even if you know some of this information, repetition is key. And it's important that if there's some information here that you haven't heard and you want to run up and ask this person, what did you say? They may have forgotten. It's your responsibility to take notes and keep yourself accountable. That said, we're listed as 1% in this space, right? Except in rich people world, 1% is great, right? In the cannabis world, 1% for African American is really pathetic, right? And so what I'd like to do is pose a twofold question. In all of our businesses, and this is to all of you, what challenges have you faced? And where do you see where we can do better, right? Because the 1% is definitely, the industry itself, but we also have to bring something ourselves. So I'd rather us not sit here and complain, but try to create and have engaging topics of solutions or steps towards solutions. Is that fair? Okay, so I'll start with you, Marvin.
Me personally, being a former athlete and have some capital, I really haven't ran into some of the issues that I think generally you would run into if you're a person of color trying to get into the space, because I get deals coming to me all the time, some good, some bad. And, I think that's one of the benefits. And the thing about the 1% in our community is some of it is on us, and rightly so. We have a lot of trepidation about this plan because we were the ones, and still are the ones, getting arrested. The mandatory minimums, private prison pipeline, breaking up of families. When you look at the etymology of this being a Schedule I drug, Richard Nixon wanted to go after two groups. He wanted to go after the hippies, and he wanted to go after African Americans. So we bore the brunt of all the bad things in cannabis, and now that it's moved to the green market, and I got this from Reverend Al because he has a way with word, we don't want, the majority going to the bank, and we're still going to jail. Right. So we have to take this to our community, because this right here is kind of preaching to the choir, which is fine, but we have to take this to our community and educate them about the medicinal benefits of this plant, and educate them how this can change the economic solution or situation for them. I think it's wonderful. And one of the things that I wanted to do was kind of have a national organization, because we have so many groups out there that are doing good, but there's strength in numbers. At some point, we'll have to come together, and in that way, we can really affect policy with this plan and make sure that we have a level playing field and we have a seat at the table. And some of the things that you're talking about, lack of capital and the application process and what have you, we need to be in there so when the laws are written that it's fair. Because just because you have a non-violent misdemeanor dealing with this plant, in some states they exclude you. I believe it's the state of Washington that if you have a non-violent felony and they score 10 points or 5 points, that's like 5 points against you. So that's going to lock us out too. So I want this to be accessible to anybody that wants to get into this business. We have to educate our community and bring it there. Reverend Al has given us the opportunity to go to the churches. If you know about the civil rights movement, the churches kind of led it. The biggest influence in the people of color, the black and brown community, is the church. I have no issue going into the church and standing up and telling them about this plant, because I'm not going to talk about the ideology and what the book says and what have you. I'm just going to say follow the science. If you follow the science, you're going to come to a logical conclusion.
Thank you. And that's actually a great point. So if you are part of church organizations, communities, propose it. Why not? Open it. Ask. Begin the questions. Begin the dialogue. Begin the conversation. And you can invite someone like Marvin Washington to your church. We'll stand up front and talk about the plan. Chanda.
For me, I feel like it's self-accountability. As Gia said, we talked about this earlier on another panel, and for me, it's executing. I am so against tokenism in this industry. I work with a diverse group of people. It's not something that I discuss often, is the issue of the lack of diversity or the lack of minorities in the industry, because people find me for projects. I'm working on 3 projects And none of these projects are with people of color. And these people brought me to the table. They are from as far away as Texas. They brought me in on a software project. I'm not an engineer, but what they found was, well, they were referred to me by clients I had worked for. The client hired me to do a job and I executed. So they referred me to someone else. And this is a multi-million-dollar project. They brought me in, they fly me all over the place to be their consultant. So I think that is the self-accountability. It's paying it forward. It's mentoring other people in our community to make sure that we are bringing others along with us as we succeed, using the platforms that we have created or the platforms that are created for us to bring others in our community along. So I think that the first thing we need to do is just be accountable for the products and services that we're putting out. Don't want to be the person on the team because you're the minority. You want to be the person on the team because you're really good at what you do.
Thank you.
Well, let me start by saying that I'm an entrepreneur, a businessman. And so the 1%, I think that applies in employment and ownership. And I think we've exhausted the discussion on the reasons for. And so I say, now what? What do you do? In business, there's challenges at many, many levels, okay? But one of the things that I don't see in this industry is the collaboration, the partnership. What I've learned in my 25 years of business, it's not money, it's not the pedigree of education. At the end of the day, what's gonna make a difference is your ability to adapt. I've been involved with enough business plans. The moment you write them, something's going wrong, okay? And so if you share my hue and you're sitting in this room, you're sitting here because there was a lot of people that came before you that had a high ability to adapt. And that's what business is. So when we looked at the application in Pennsylvania, we didn't look for what was going against us. We looked for where we could find an advantage. And we played to that. And at the end of the day, we wanted to overdo the point of qualification to make the point. And I believe if we hadn't been awarded a license, there would have been a lot of questions, why? So, even, all people, I would say, that enter into business, there are challenges, but, it's your creativity and your ability to fail and keep moving. That, at the end of the day, that's gonna make the difference.
Thank you. And that is key, because it happens. We fail, and we fail in this space a lot. One, it's early. No one's written the blueprint yet. We're actually writing the blueprint. Our mistakes are developing the blueprint. And so for those that enter the space and they're afraid to fail, pity on you. Because you're going to be part of the solutions that down the line will look back at the pioneers and said, due to their mistakes, we've learned this. Every great leader has failed. But I'm actually going to change it a little bit on you, Dr. Knox. We've already talked about the 1%, but what many people of color in this space have found is that because there aren't many of us, we're also looking for, we become a little lonely. And we're looking for those mentors. We're looking for those relationships. And I know you talked about your business, but you're also part of an organization and you also mentor. And I'd like to pose to you and Chanda, can you talk about the importance of building relationships? Because Sterling just touched on that. So I figured it's a great segue because I know what you do and I know what you, Chanda, do. So if we can talk about the importance of relationships and how at times, yes, it does get lonely, not only within the space, but also outside of it. So if you can just talk.
The power of relationships in this space is everything. And I'll speak from the doctor hat here. And I'll start with my challenge, which you'll see I'll get back around to answering your question. So as a medical student, as a resident in family medicine, I felt absolutely complicit in the propagating disease in our community. I trained in Charlotte, North Carolina. 98% of my patient base was Black. And we were prescribing pill after pill after pill after pill after procedure after pill after procedure, and not making a difference in the lives of these patients. And so I didn't take a job in the conventional system. I left. My sister, we graduated at the same time, went to residency together. Neither one of us applied for jobs in the conventional space. We immediately started working with our parents in cannabis medicine. And that was lonely, right? We're bucking the conventional medical system. We do not have medical governance that dictates how we should practice cannabis medicine. We are literally writing the book as we go. And that's a challenge too, because in conventional medicine, despite all the literature and the evidence and the research and the clinical data, and you guys, there's way more clinical data and research on cannabis than any of the prescription drugs that you guys take, the over-the-counter drugs. We prescribe drugs off-label, meaning that the FDA didn't even approve those drugs for the way we're using them. There are 0 studies on those drugs in the use of that particular condition, yet we use it anyways. So we have enough literature. But combating the conventional medical space with the hats that we wear is a challenge, right? And my sister and I are young. People ask us all the time, aren't you afraid you might lose your license? We're not, because we think we're doing something meaningful and powerful for our people. So anyways, we're lonely in that regard, but we're also lonely in the industry. There are not a lot of medical professionals who know a thing about cannabis medicine. When you go to conventions and cultivators and processors and patients know more than you do, medical professional, that's embarrassing. All right? So we made it our purpose to learn everything we could about cannabis medicine. Whatever the top researchers and scientists and clinicians in this world know, we want to make sure that we know it. And in learning that, we have shown up at conferences and conventions and meetings, town hall, things like that, to meet different people in the sector, because we wanted to be respected, and we wanted to be part of the conversation. And so in that process, we became very expert. But still, patients are like, my doctor doesn't know a thing about cannabis, what do you know? And cultivators and processors, et cetera, think that they know more than we do, and that's not the case anymore. But we need each other, right? So I say that to say that we need to start having conversations with one another. And I spoke at NCIA's conference on the subject of healthcare professionals and the traditional players in the cannabis industry working together to elevate the industry together. Patients come into my clinics, and I'm based out of Oregon right now, so we have adult use, right? So people do not need a medical card to go to a dispensary, but they still come to me first, and they're asking me all the ways in which they can use their cannabis to treat their condition. They're not interested in a card, I just want to run it by you first, doc. And what do you recommend? So they're asking me to make brand recommendations to them. So what does that do in an industry where all these other players are making products they want people to buy? We need to start having conversations about what people can use, how they can use it, the ease of use, how do you package for children, how do you package for adults? What are all the ways in which we need to think about our products from seed to sale, and marketing in between, and packaging, et cetera. How does that make sense as one big industry? Well, we're only going to make sense of that if we, one, understand that cannabis is medicine, it's a wellness product, and then make our products with that understanding, right? I can't just say, oh, go out there and look for CBD, and the patient goes to the dispensary, he's like, I'm just looking for CBD, and then the bud tender says, well, I'll throw some CBD at you, and hope that treats whatever condition that you're dealing with. And so we have to know each other, and we have to keep each other in conversation, because this industry is only going to make sense if we're all in communication.
Thank you. And so my takeaway from that is also, in addition to coming to doctors like yourself, people need to do research, the need to become self-educated. We read about many other things. Why not learn about this plan so that when you come to doctors like yourself, we're actually coming with a more informed question, right? I've read about this, I've read about that, what do you know? So, thank you. Chanda, I'm going to pose the same question to you in terms of building relationships, because I know you're strong on that. And if you can just talk about that, especially in the space, in regards to collaborations.
Well, what's interesting is that the first question you asked, Gia, was that, how is this space lonely? So when I started to have this conversation about this space, my family, meaning my mother, my mother-in-law, like, you're gonna do what? And I said, no, this is something I believe in, and I am a doctor, I'm a philosopher. I have a degree to philosophize in cell biology. I have studied cancer. I can make these accusations and feel supported in my decision that I want to treat people with cannabis. And they're like, no, you want to get locked up and you want your family to suffer. And so when you talk about loneliness, the first isolation was from family members. So I stood out on faith and I decided to go forward with what I wanted to do for that convicted reason. And then I go and sit in a room with my peers. So I have publications, scientific publications. I have over 10 global patents, 3 US patents, and my peers are saying that, why would you choose a career in cannabis knowing that it's going to stigmatize you and you will not be respected as a scientist? And I had to say, look at, I went to biology building right here, Just. If I had conformed because of what other people wanted me to do, I would not be in this space. So again, another type of loneliness, but because I felt the direct impact. So now let's talk about relationship building. You take the leap of faith, you're in a dispensary, and I see the patient's life changing. That's relationship building. When I see my patients that were this thin, that now can go out there and have a quality of life because I took that leap and bound for them, that's relationship building. So what I say about that is that you have to do what you feel is right for you, your community, and those that you know that you can impact. And you cannot look back on that decision. Keep moving forward and finding the way. And in DC, we have been doing that. First, it was MDs that could recommend. We fought for more people to be able to recommend. Now we have dentists, we have nurse practitioners, yes, naturopaths. We are working diligently that at first, if you had a misdemeanor conviction for possession, you could not enter this industry. We have fought hard, and now you can. You can work in holding the plant. We are pushing the boundaries, and we're doing it because we believe in this relationship with our community now. So, lonely, I'm feeling kind of warm and fuzzy right now.
Me too. And I don't know if everyone can see from back there, but I'm sitting close to this panel. So I not only see the passion, I feel the passion. And I can tell, just coming from Chanda, how emotional she gets when she talks about the relationship building. And that's what most of us are looking for, even for many of our doctors, to care that much about our well-being. As Dr. Knox said, she wasn't satisfied with just prescription after prescription, which we talked about in the car. We talked about veterans, and my frustration for learning that, the opioid crisis with vets. I'm like, are you kidding? They're just like pumping them up with drugs. And so to hear how much you all care is so important. We touched on education, and I'm hoping that you can give some kind of recommendations. You mentioned research. Where do you go to for research? What are you reading? What can you make suggestions to this audience? What can they look for? Or where should they go?
I'll start off with that. So first of all, there's a couple of sources that we started off when we were just starting. The Cannabis Pharmacy is a book by Dr. Michael Backus. He is with a Bacon Group, which is a cultivator here, the first female cultivator who grew all their mother plants in the house. So Ms. Jamila, can you please stand up and let people acknowledge your greatness? What she did for this industry in Washington, D.C. has impacted the patients. I see it every day. And so that book has been one of the biggest foundations for us. Also, Green Life has classes. National Holistic has classes. My classes are mostly research-based. It's an aggregated amount of data that's collected from different articles, journals that are proven scientific facts in the industry. So with that, each patient that comes in, we have a half an hour education session with them so they can understand why they're being treated the way they're being treated. The second time a patient comes in, we're actually giving a 15-minute consultation with them to see if their medicines are lined up. Now, that might sound expensive, but when you're a new patient at National Holistic Healing, we give you $100 once you walk in the building because we want to make sure that you have the right medicine and that you are aligned properly. And if we need to change your treatment plan, we will do so. So with that, and then the third time you come in is online ordering. We think we have you right. So that's our path at National Holistic, but Dr. Knox?
PubMed.com. PubMed. PUBMED. You can find just about any published article on cannabis, on the endocannabinoid system, on cannabis in certain or specific conditions. And most of that content is free. Some of it is paid, but they have all the abstracts available to read.
Hold the mic.
Okay.
Did you guys understand about the cannabinoid system? Does everyone understand that here? Because we talked about that earlier, right? Many times I go in rooms just like this, and there are people nodding their head because sometimes they're a little embarrassed, like, no, I don't know. Can you just, for those that are in the closet, like, oh, I don't know.
So you all are aware you have a cardiovascular system, right, and a nervous system, the GI system, your intestines, your reproductive systems, how you make babies. Well, you have an endocannabinoid system. It's a 600 million-year-old system that's inside of the bodies of all mammals. Think of it as the maestro of a symphony. It keeps our bodies in balance. It regulates every one of those systems I just mentioned. It regulates our sleep cycles. It regulates our moods. It regulates our pain. To get pregnant, you have to have a well-functioning endocannabinoid system. Endocannabinoid comes from two words, endogenous and cannabinoid. Endogenous means inside the body. Cannabinoid is a molecule. So we named this system after the plant cannabis because our body makes molecules that we call cannabinoids that are close, very close in action to the molecules inside cannabis that we call cannabinoids as well. The molecules in the cannabis plant and other botanicals we would consider phyto, right? Phyto meaning plant-derived, phytocannabinoids. And the cannabinoids within our body, endocannabinoids. So our endocannabinoid system, in that it regulates almost everything in our body, has receptors almost everywhere in our body. And that's why when we use substances like cannabis, it seems to work everywhere in our body. And so in the most layman's terms, cannabis is a tool to help bring our body back into balance. We can have endocannabinoid excitement, so the endocannabinoid system is running too well, or we can have endocannabinoid deficiency, where we're deficient in making those molecules, or we may be deficient in the expression, so the existence of those receptors that we need as well. And we call that in general endocannabinoid dysfunction. And there are scientists working away at tests to determine what kind of endocannabinoid dysfunction people might have so that we can better match certain chemo profiles, so strains of cannabis, to conditions to better treat them, to target them a little bit better. But the endocannabinoid system is the reason you guys are all alive right now, okay? And the overwhelming majority of people have a deficient endocannabinoid system. You don't get sick with a well-running and functioning endocannabinoid system.
Thank you. You got it. You're welcome. I know someone's like, really? Okay. I'm actually going to move on. Sterling, do you have any recommendations? Just really quickly, just the next three. Anything that someone should be reading, something you read recently, an article that you think is a standout?
No, I think they've done a great job. Being very thorough. I read all of those things, and then all of the publications geared to the industry. I mean, there's new discoveries every day. I will say that one of the things that this industry desperately needs is the research. Our government makes that pretty hard, but it looks like with some bills that were recently introduced and some of the work that Marvin and his colleagues are doing, that research should open up.
Well, Shantae is going to contribute really quickly, and then we're going to go to Marvin, because I'm going to talk about the lawsuit, because you have to.
I agree. They did a really good job with discussing the things that are out there already, but the entrepreneur in me that sits down and works with these ladies all the time, we have started to develop some training materials that include the endocannabinoid system, the strain alignment. So like we said, relationship building is very important. Part of that is we're partnering to provide training for the industry, to patients, to physicians, and to dispensary owners. And of course, these two ladies and a couple of other consultants and industry professionals will be contributing to that. So that will also be a resource for the industry.
Thank you. I could ask you the same question, but I think I really would love for you to really touch on, I don't know if many of you know, but Marvin Washington was part of a lawsuit, and it got some pretty good national attention, and they're still fighting. And I'd love for him to really just explain why, right? And say it again. Oh, right. And well, also why the lawsuit? Well, first, who did you sue, and why the lawsuit, and where you are now?
Well, a firm out of New York City approached me about what they were trying to do, and I had 2.5 meetings with them before I was convinced that I wanted to be a part of it, because it kind of pissed me off when you learn about the reason why it was Schedule 1. And I wanted it for two reasons: for legalization or decriminalization, of course, and also I wanted it, being an African American in this country, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. And I say that because this was put into place as a Schedule 1 drug to go after, like I said before, two groups: the hippies that were protesting the Vietnam War. Nixon hated them, but he also hated African Americans. Once it became a Schedule 1 drug in 1972, 1973, 33 African Americans were arrested that year for this plant, and that's the start of the drug war. So I want that to end. I want fairness, and it doesn't matter, because we filed this suit. Jeff Sessions is the lead defendant, but it didn't matter whether it was Janet Lynch or Eric Holder. We were suing the Department of Justice, the DEA, and both bodies of Congress, to make sure that we're trying to get this thing off of the Schedule 1, because one of the biggest thing that the government, and we had a hearing about it last week, the government said it has no medicinal benefits. Well, it has no medicinal benefits. Why do you hold a patent? If it has no medicinal benefits, why are you growing it at the University of Mississippi? If it has no medicinal benefits, why do you have that new drug program where you're giving it out to patients that have glaucoma or whatever indications that they have? So that's why I joined the case, because I think we have a chance to win. We went in last week. There's a little girl, 13-year-old girl named Alexis Bordell, and she's a refugee from Texas. She lives in Colorado because Texas, you can't have high doses of THC. So she has to go to Colorado get her medicine. So she wanted to come here this week to lobby and bring her medicine with her on federal ground. They went into court, and the government was citing cases from the 60s and the 70s. And the judge, and then they wanted the case dismissed outright, which a lot of people in the legal community thought would happen. It didn't happen. We got an expedited trial date. So that means, like, on that judge's docket next year, unless there's a death penalty case, which there isn't in New York, we're going to be up. And we got a chance for discovery, number 2. So we'll know, what does the government know, when did they know it? And number 3, I just said, we're in the ballgame. I'm happy about this, and we're not doing it. We're not trying to get any monetary damages, man. We're trying to do this for this country, because one of the things that's eating at the underbelly of this country is the opiate addiction. It's rural and urban, particularly rural. And so I believe this plant, whole plant cannabis, can heal that issue. Another reason why I did it is because I wanted to take away the excuse that the NFL has about, why they're not researching it. Now they're coming along, because it's the NFL and the NFLPA, the Players Association, that represents the body of players. They're on board. And hopefully I had something to do with that, because 4.5 years ago when I called him, the guy was like, well, Marvin, we're not going to have our players digesting marijuana. And then I just hit him with facts and kept sending it to him, sending them articles, this may be of interest to you. And then they started coming to me, and now that's a priority for them to take it to the NFL, because the NFL is the biggest sports league in the world. If they get behind it and show that they're using it for medicinal purposes and it could solve their issue, which is the opiate addiction of the former players in the NFL are 4 times more likely to abuse opiates than general society. That tells you something, because it's really kicking society's butt. And then CTE, the concussion issue that they have. Cannabis can solve both, I believe. And so that's why I'm a part of this lawsuit, and that's why I'm so passionate about decriminalizing and rescheduling this plant, because it's just ridiculous, because we've been using this plant for thousands of years. And the reason why it was criminalized and demonized, it'll piss you off, especially if you're a person of color. And it doesn't start with Nixon, it starts back in the 30s with Henry Aslinger, who said that the Negro that smokes cannabis thinks he's good enough to step into a white man's shower. So that those type of things. And so I believe it's going to happen. 10 years ago it was if. I just believe now it's a matter of when. And so we're on the right side of history.
Thank you. I also wanted to add that in addition to the reading materials that have already been mentioned, I hope you all are looking at mainstream media. If you've noticed recently, there's been a surge of cannabis articles and information that's really coming to the forefront, which means that it's changing. I have a PR background, and so for me, I pay attention to this, because now there are beat reporters that are covering the cannabis industry, which tells us that there's a shift in the space. And when the Wall Street Journal has their own beat reporter, and the New York Times has theirs, and Forbes magazine has 5 cannabis reporters. Yes, they're freelancers, but still they're reporting. Fortune. We're seeing more and more of this. I continue to be a student in this space. Yes, maybe leaders, right? Why not call yourself a leader? You're doing the work. But we continue to learn and I say educate ourselves. And I think it's very important, in addition to information that has been shared on the panel, sign up for these newsletters, these industry trades. Start taking a look at who's covering the cannabis industry in these mainstream publications. It's really key, because then you'll start to learn about more of these companies. Who are they doing business with? I learned about all of the publicly traded companies, not just here in the US, but in Canada and other countries. So in addition to the medicinal side of it, and yes, you've got the rec side, but you also have the financial side. And so that I say all of that because it brings me to the most common question, right? How do I invest in the cannabis industry? I want to invest. I want to put my money behind something. And my common question is, what do you even know about investing in the first place? What are you investing in? Like, if you've never invested in the stock market, why all of a sudden are you quick to put your pennies in penny stock? Not penny stocks, really. Like, no, I don't want 5 pennies. But the importance of that is now is the time, especially because we're so early in this space, to truly understand and learn what investing in a business is, whether if it's in financial services or within a business. It's really key. And I've used the example of there are many people that boycott companies and they go out and they're marching, and I'm all for it. But guess what? Your 401k is sometimes still tied to those same companies that you're boycotting. It's now time to understand and learn who you want to invest in. It's still the Wild West in our space, right? But with that said, there are many trends and outlooks that we're seeing. I know from your side of the business, Sterling from your side, Marvin from yours. If we can just quickly touch upon that, what are you seeing? What trends and outlooks are you seeing within the space? I'm not saying give financial advice. No, don't go out and say, oh, well, Marvin said or Chanda said. But within the dispensary market, I'm sure that there are some things that people are coming forward with asking about. If you can just share that insight.
Very hard question to navigate, because what I've seen is that people, everyday people who want to enter this industry will say, I want to go for a dispensary. So they hire a consultant that has really no track record of winning in any state or said but have no proof. They pay that consultant to write their application and submit it, and nothing happens. They don't win. And in that, what is the investment? The investment is usually $50,000 to $100,000 for the application. Most applications will require you to hold the location. Most locations will fall to about $50,000 a year. Then you have to have an architectural drawing to actually apply, which will be another $5,000. You have to have a survey, which is usually another $1,200. And so you have then cashed out your 401k and you have nothing to show for it. So this is what I call the predatory aspect of the Wild Wild West. And it is very common. And so what I say to you is that you have to make informed decisions in this space. When you decide to invest, you have to know if that person is an expert in their field. Now, I'm going to pause there because the person who focuses on teams and expert is this lady over here. And tell me what you're looking for in an expert.
Well, as Chanda said, a lot of what I do for my teams is to find them subject matter experts, find the writers. For example, for the Ohio application, which is one that is near and dear to my heart. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. We needed an architect. So I was out in Columbus this week and I talked to 14 architects. The architect that we hired has a background in building prisons, because what's important in this industry? Security. So I have a security expert who has written regulations for many states. He's consulted with many states, and he has won 26 cultivation and dispensary licenses. So I have an architect who builds prisons. I have a security consultant who's former law enforcement, and he knows both sides of the industry. He has worked for states, and he has won licenses for consulting clients. In addition to that, I have 2 former state inspectors who whose job it was to award licenses or final licenses approval in 2 different states. So, and that's just an example of what we're using for Ohio, but we have these resources for all of our clients. And that's just the security and some of the compliance piece. So what I tell clients when they come to me and say, Shante, what should I be looking for? Well, what was that attorney that is calling themselves a cannabis expert doing this time 3 years ago? If they were just defending people who were caught with drugs, you want to look for someone else. If you're in a state that this is new, look for a compliance attorney. Their skills will much more closely align with what you need. Look for somebody who's a contract attorney, a regulatory attorney, because they are used to dealing with these kinds of regulations. And that's much better than going with someone who says, I'm a cannabis expert, just because they decided that's what they wanted to do. So there are certain skill sets that lend themselves to this industry. And if you can't get someone from another state who does have the experience, these are the things you need to look for. When you talk to an accountant, the first question you ask them is about 280E. If they cannot tell you everything about 280E, you need to leave. Because there's absolutely no reason that you should have an accountant that you're paying to learn on the job. Because there are many of them out there that are familiar with 280E. Amen. I mean, it's really about knowing the questions that you have to ask, and like what Chanda said, when it comes to a consultant. And unfortunately, people who are really, really wanting to get into the industry, they don't know. So they go to people who say that they're an expert, and they don't even know what questions to ask them. So I think that it's really smart to come to events like this and to talk to people who have been there, who have gone before you, because I always say to people, my time as a consultant is a commodity. So I'll give you some things for free, but I have to be honest, I'm a consultant, I charge for my time. But in this environment, I will tell you, if you have a specific question for me, well, I was talking to an attorney. I would say that to you, and that's going to get you started down the path of finding an attorney who's better suited for your project. So it's always really important. That's also part of building the relationships. You have those relationships. Build a relationship with Miss Chanda, honey. She'll give you everything you want. I have to manage and regulate her time because Chanda wants to give everything to everybody, and she can't do that. But it's important that, we definitely believe in paying it forward and making sure that we are bringing more people of color and women into this industry. So being in environments like this where you can get that information is going to be critical to your success if you're just entering the industry.
Thank you. So Sterling, I'm going to actually jump over to you. Can you touch on what you look for investors that want to invest in your businesses?
Well, first they have to have money.
Well, common, yes.
No.
It helps.
Well, no, I think it's very important first to deal with educated investors, because you have to know what you're investing in first. So one of the tough things about the medical cannabis business is that you have this big, expensive prerequisite that you have to satisfy before you have an opportunity to sell, product or grow product, whatever your focus is going to be. So in the case of Pennsylvania, that application effort costs $1.5 million. Okay, so that's your high risk capital, and so those are people who typically know something about the business. They're looking to align with your team because they're bringing some type of expertise. And then you have your next round of investment after you receive the license. And I think we all have to deal with qualified investors. Anytime you put out a private placement memorandum, the rules are $200,000 a year in income or $1 million of net worth. And so when you start to take in that money, you have to make sure that the people that you're dealing with are credible and are telling you the truth, because the compliance for all of that will fall back on you. You're responsible for it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to jump down to Marvin. Can you give some tips on what you look for in investing in a business?
Well, I look for, because I said I'm in like 5 different companies, and the number one thing that I look for is a company that's going to put patients first, because there are a lot of people in this space that are getting in for profits, and I don't think in this space that should be important. I think it's about the patients and making sure that they're taken care of, because the patients are going to be your mother, your grandmother, your uncle, and your aunt, and there's a lot of yahoos and former drug dealers in this industry. So it has to be, solid people and a product that I think the general public is going to want. And we're talking about, when you talk about the plant, 4 of my companies do not touch, we don't touch the plant. One of them is the medical marijuana company with Montel Williams, which I think he's certified, and very impressed with him, and it took me a while to get to know him and invest in his company. The other is our CBD, and I don't know if people know, if this is their first time here, is CBD is one of the cannabinoids in the cannabis plant that doesn't get you high, but has all the medicinal benefits. And so that's the side I'm on. Not that I'm against THC, but that's not for everybody. And I have water, I have pain creams, I have beauty products, I have protein shakes, gummies, tinctures, swabs, whatever it is, we can try to infuse it with CBD. And that's what I look for, something that the public is already using and trying to enhance it. Because one of the things that's in formulation now for my company, one of my companies, is we're going to come out with the sugar-free sports drink. One of the reasons why I don't drink Gatorade and Powerade and all that stuff is because of the sugar content. And despite what they're telling you, the nutritionists that are telling you about fat content or whatever, that's propaganda from the sugar industry. It's the sugar that causes the illness and that's kicking your butt. And I'm not a big THC guy, and when I was using illicit drugs, I was on the other side with drink and what have you. But I know sugar lights up your brain like unbelievable, more than cocaine did. And so that's one of the reasons why we're doing that. But getting back to the question, is putting people first and then having a viable product out there. But it also has to be a solid business plan, because I've seen some business plans that be like, what is this? And there are a lot of great ideals in this space, but most of the time they don't match up with their business plan.
Thank you. And I'm actually going to follow up with Dr. Knox, but I will say this. Marvin actually suggested that I try one of his products that I am in love with, the Isoderm, the blue bottle.
Oh, yeah.
It's serious. Like, I'm not one who was really using much products before entering the space. Now, I laugh at typical pharmaceutical things that I find in Duane Reade or CVS or Walgreens. He introduced me to this product that he has. I promise you, if I feel like I think I might be getting an ache, I'm like rubbing it on and putting it here, putting it there. Be exploratory. Try these products. They really do work. And so that brings me to Dr. Knox in terms of trends and outlooks. I know we were talking about health earlier. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, CBD is huge. We're talking about trends and outlooks, right? Hemp-derived CBD is huge right now. There's even multi-level marketing companies that are promoting hemp CBD, because CBD is CBD. It's CBD, right? It's a molecule. It does wonderful things. It's an antioxidant. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's a neuroprotectant. CBD as a trend in of itself is a good trend as long as it comes from a clean source material and as long as it's processed responsibly. Speaking to using cannabis, I really like to hone in on the fact that 1 in 2 adults in our country is sick, right? We're suffering from insomnia and anxiety on, the most common end of the spectrum, and then we're suffering from things like heart disease and cancer, all of which we have scientific evidence that cannabis can treat to some degree. So it would behoove all of us, like Gia said, to experiment and try cannabis. It's very broad spectrum, meaning that it can treat a lot of conditions, and has a very broad safety profile because it's a whole plant, right? When we get into pharmaceutical drugs, that are based off isolates, so singular molecules. Well, they might target something in the body that makes us feel a little bit better, but at the expense of toxic side effects, adverse effects. And cannabis does not operate that way in our bodies. There are specific ways we have to use it in certain populations, but I won't get into that. If anybody has questions later, I'm happy to answer. But use, at the very least, use CBD. If you're in a medical state, adult use state, a nothing use state, hemp-derived CBD at the very least you can procure and you should be using. Again, CBD is a neuroprotectant, right? Marvin was talking about using it in athletes. I highly recommend every single parent in this room who has a child in sports to be pre-medicating their kids with CBD. It is a neuroprotectant. All of you guys can make the choice to use a cannabis product if you want to. But it has extraordinary healing potentials, and there really is no downside to using that CBD. Each and every one of us can tolerate up to 10 to 20 milligrams of CBD per pound of our body weight on a daily basis. All right, so there's 200 pounders in here. What's 20 times 20? 200. In the thousands, we can tolerate a whole heck of a lot of CBD. And I recommend 10 to 20 milligrams of CBD a day just for wellness purposes. Whether you're sick or well, get that CBD into your body, experiment, see how you feel. So that's a major trend.
Thank you so much. So we're actually going to turn this over for Q&A. What I wanted to just say, in terms of, you made a point of use cannabis, right? When I first started in the space, I tell people, I don't consume. And I thought, after a while of saying that, I'm like, what does it matter? What does it, you don't have to enter into the space. I was sitting across someone at lunch, and they decided that, they don't drink. I didn't judge them. So I felt I would remove the line of saying, I don't consume. I don't care if you think I do or not. Because part of removing the stigma is not having to defend your position in the space. It is what it is. It's healthy, it's medicine. So why should I not? It doesn't matter if I use it or not. I do in different formats, but until we all become more educated, it's just one of those things. But I'd love to open up the floor for questions. I think I need to do that. And, okay. Oh, maybe I'll do that, yeah. So now you're going to have to stand at the podium. And the mic is already hot. Okay. I've seen you before. Hi.
I just want to say, excellent job, great information. I'm so glad I'm here. You guys loaded my brain with tons of information, so I'm going to try to be as precise as I can. I will. But I own a dispensary license in Maryland, and I started with a predominantly white group, and a white-owned, majority-owned group, and one of my emphasis was on the black community, the black business, that the fact that we're ignored in this industry, and I saw the opportunity. And my company didn't agree with me. We just didn't have the same goals, but that didn't distract me at all. I've kind of gone my own way. But the main thing that I see is that opportunity. One of the things we talk about is we as a people, we are one of the largest consumers. We are the consumers of America. And I'm like, we got to focus on that. We've got to exchange with that community. And so I'm just saying to the folks here, you've got to understand that we are the largest consumers, and we consume a lot of cannabis. And I'm like, I don't understand where that disconnect is. We've got to take advantage of that. So that's what I've been working on, is knowing that huge opportunity is there, regardless of what the laws say. The money dictates the industry, and if we go after that money, we will be doing well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Scott Cecil. I'm with Students for Sensible Drug Policy, a nonprofit based here in DC. And we're on about 300 college campuses here in the US and 26 other countries around the world trying to end the war on drugs. So my question is about a population that hasn't really been discussed much tonight, which is youth. It's neat when we can legalize cannabis, but you have to be 21 in order to go purchase that. I'll speak for myself. I know I smoked cannabis in college and I didn't wait till I was 21 to try it. And seeing as how we're on a college campus that has a zero tolerance drug policy that evicts students for having cannabis in the dorms here, even just having it, not even smoking it, having it, can get you kicked out of the dorms here immediately. Not get your stuff and get out by tomorrow immediately. So my question to y'all is, what have you done to support youth who aren't able to participate in the legal cannabis market, and how much money do you want to give me so I can help support them further?
Who wants to?
I treat it like alcohol, and I believe that's how it's going to be at some point. Everybody, I imagine if you went to college, you had beers and what have you, but it was still, outside the law. And when you talk about adult use, to me, I really haven't thought about anybody under 21 years old for a number of reasons. Just like I don't think you should be playing football till you're about 15, 16 either because of your developing brain. But my advice is wait till you're 21. The millennials, they're a bigger demographic than the baby boomers. They're the ones that are going to push this. The dynamic people that are going to be in this industry, they're in junior high, they're in high school, they're in college. So it's up to you. We're just setting the way for you, set the table for you.
But on the flip side of that, again, can you guys hear back there?
Yeah.
I can talk loud.
Yeah, I got you, yes.
Our Black youth has illness that can be treated with cannabis. We have autism, we have ADHD, we have anxiety, we have PTSD. We need to get our children into doctors' offices who write for authorizations. I care for children. My office cares for infants, kids with seizures at 3 weeks of age, right? We need to participate. You mentioned we're the biggest consumer power in this country. Let's put our money where our mouth and our hearts are, right? Let's intentionally use cannabis. Let's get our kids into these offices and talk about how to use cannabis meaningfully for those diseases. We are over-medicating our kids on Ritalin and uppers and antidepressants, and that's not the solution. And so if we're participating, meaning we're actively engaged, intentionally using cannabis as medicine, well then we can get into these schools and talk about allowing children, I'm talking elementary school kids, high schoolers, and college students to have their medicine on campus. You guys, cannabis is medicine. All right, can we start centering all of our conversations around it being a substance of wellness? That's gonna change the way we create our policies, right? So if we want our youth to be able to meaningfully use cannabis, and I'm not saying you can't enjoy it, yes, you can. That's still a therapeutic use. But we need to start protecting ourselves as consumers of a medicine.
And encouraging them to, at this stage in college, to start focusing on this industry as a career choice.
That's right.
That you're leaving, graduating, saying that's the space I'm going.
Arrest of Black youth has gone up in Colorado since legalization. Arrest of Black youth is going up.
Same in New York.
Like, maybe they shouldn't be using it, sir, but like...
So in Washington, so in Washington, D.C., what we did is that we allow you to get your card at 18.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so our policy in Washington, D.C. is that if you're 18 years or older with any qualifying condition, which is any condition in Washington, D.C., you are protected. So...
Not from the university, you're not.
But
what you have to understand is that's the same thing as federal housing. If you live in a place where it's prohibited, you can't smoke a cigarette. So you might want to look at off-campus housing.
And employment law too.
Right.
You have to live in the dorm here.
Well, but you have to.
We're talking about something totally different. If those are the rules of your dorm, we're not saying you break rules. I did a live call-in show where people called in and said, well, you're advocating the use of cannabis. What about people driving a motor vehicle? Well, it's illegal to operate a vehicle under the influence of cannabis. You still have to operate within the law or whatever the regulations are. It is unfortunate that your dorms prohibit cannabis, but you know that going in. You are able to become a patient, so you may have to consume elsewhere. But until that your university has made that change, you do have to follow the rules. It's the same with, Initiative 71 in Washington, D.C. A lot of people have issues with their federal housing. There's that problem of if I live in federal housing, they're saying that I cannot have cannabis, I can't grow my cannabis. Well, that is unfortunate, but that is what your housing is saying. Do you want to have a home and fight with them about your cannabis? Or do you want to move and then consume your cannabis where you are? You fight them to see if you can get the rule changed, but you have to prioritize your housing and maybe consume your cannabis somewhere else. We just really have to deal with the reality as it is until we're able to change it. But like Chanda said, and this is something I'm really passionate about because I'm the mother of a special needs child who is 11. And at 5 years old, I started researching cannabis as a treatment for him. The very first pediatrician to come into my business to write recommendations for children is my son's pediatrician. And she's a developmental pediatrician. She worked and trained at Kennedy Krieger for about 15 years. And both her and the partner in her office are writing recommendations. We had one child come into the school. I live in Howard County. So we went to the school with the parent. The pediatrician went to the school with the parent to speak to the school nurse because they were okay with making sure this child could take their Vyvanse, but they were saying they couldn't take their medical cannabis. So we took the physician along with the parent to the school and let the school know that when the mother was coming there every day because the mother wasn't giving the child the Vyvanse anymore, so the school didn't know what was going on. She was taking the child outside of the school to treat the child with their medical cannabis, but they had noticed an improvement in the child, in his function, in his focus. So we took the physician to say, this is what's been going on for the last 30 days. So we were able to get an exception for that child. You just have to fight for the things that are important to you, because no one's going to just make it happen.
Thank you, everybody. Hi, my name is Takia Young, and I actually had this question earlier, so I'm glad I'm here again. And the question is in reference, my background is in physics and bioengineering. So my question is on the STEM side in terms of the industry. What do you see currently going on right now? What can you foresee as the needs as it relates to technology, whether it's fintech, health tech, ed tech, or STEM? What do you see as forthcoming for people who are interested in getting into the industry from a technical and business side?
Do it. and I'm not being sarcastic, but it's the truth. Sarita said it earlier on the panel that
This space needs everything from soup to nuts. Canatech is huge. It's a big, look, can we not live without technology? So why wouldn't it be in this space? There are apps, there are data developers. It's needed. If that is your background and your experience, then you need to be exploring and figuring out what is your contribution or what is the idea that you're launching. But there are businesses there. It's kind of growing on the East Coast, but of course it's more popular on the West. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be on the East Coast. It needs to be on the East Coast, the Midwest, the North, the South, everywhere. Technology is key. We can't live without it now. Hope that answered your question, Tia. I was like, I know, I'm sorry, it's like an Ia.
I'm Lisa Scott, and I didn't grow up with cannabis and smoking and everything. And I've been a chef for most of my adult life, and I kind of grew out of that and found a new thing called cannabis-infused edibles. So I have a company, I've been making them for the last couple of years since we got legal here, called Bud Appetit. And so the dispensaries, unfortunately, right now don't have too many edibles. So if you're looking for edibles, you don't want to smoke, you have lung cancer, whatever, you can eat a brownie at work and nobody will know. I'm the one you come to. Bon appetit. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean to come here to sell myself. But I want to thank the panel for coming because you guys gave a lot of diverse information because there's so many things. But I wanted to talk to the football player about your lawsuit. Is it specifically reschedule or descheduling the schedule? You know, do you want to? Is the lawsuit specific to being descheduled or rescheduled?
Descheduled.
So it would be completely. So it'd be like growing tomatoes, right? You could grow tomatoes. Because it's descheduled, it's not even.
It's descheduled, but I think it's going to come under federal regulation, just like alcohol, tobacco, what have you. That's what we're looking for. At least that's what I envision it being, because until it's like that and under federal regulation, we're just still a movement. We're just a collection, you know. And I keep saying this: we're not like the trucking, or we're not like the tobacco industry. You know, it even took the alcohol industry a while. It took them to like 1953 to get all states on board after Prohibition was lifted. Mm-hmm. So this is still like in its infancy. We're like only 17 years into this century. You know, imagine 20 years from now, 40 years from now.
So I have a follow-up.
Yes.
Suggestion for another lawsuit.
I won't be following.
If you talk to someone who wants to do something, I've talked to media a few times when I'm being interviewed about cannabis, and one of the biggest issues I have is the fact that it is still a state-by-state thing. So I could go to the dispensary and get my cannabis, but as soon as I drive over into Virginia, I could be arrested. And to me, it's kind of like a few years ago, it was a state-by-state thing, you know, with the gay marriage. And gay marriage, you could be married in the District of Columbia, but if you went to Ohio, you weren't married anymore. So the Supreme Court, you know, passed it.
Federal.
The district, they're mandating it. So it's so crazy. So I just wanted to, you know, if you run into anybody else or anybody who's thinking about a lawsuit, that should be the next one.
Can I just wait, I was actually going to bring up that point. So just quickly, I heard murmurs of it. There are, I know you're at a Women Grow event, but I do encourage people to connect with other organizations. And so I heard people here, someone said, what about, and I heard you mentioning, marijuana justice. Thank you, because I'm like, stand up, let her know. If we're here to share information, if you know of an organization that can help her, stand up so they can see you again. Please find Lisa, please, 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 so that she can help, you know, someone can help her bring that to light. Thank you. Before you ask your question, so we have time for one more after him. So if you have a question, now's the time to get up there. Don't wait until the end. Okay.
What if I get two questions?
Well, so you can do 1A, 1B, but there's only one more person after you.
Okay.
Okay. And not 30 minutes question. Just I'm just saying.
First thing that I would like to say is I just appreciate the time that you all have taken out from all of the business ventures and everything else that you've done to come and share the information that you have. So I'm just very appreciative of that. But I do want to ask a question, especially as it pertains to the minority community, is that they suffer from two stigmas, right? So the obvious stigma that we've been talking about right now is about, you know, cannabis and its consumption. And the other one is about mental health issues. So in terms of the viability of like finding a way to destigmatize these things and then to take CBDs and CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy and put them together and get them out to people who could really use the combination of these two treatments together. What do you think are some of the biggest obstacles, and do you think that there are opportunities within this space to kind of put treatment programs like that together? That's question number one.
It's on. So we do that actually at National Holistic. When a patient comes in, prior to they coming in, we evaluate the strains. I think I touched on that briefly earlier. And so we have about in-house a good 15 to 20 strains that focus on mental health. So if you are ADHD, but you lack the focus and clarity, we have specific sativas that we would recommend for you. If you are bipolar, or that's another set. Now, if you have chronic depression, that's something that we have to address, especially because it depends on what degree and also what underlying ailments you're dealing with. See, mental health is just one aspect, but as the doctor here will also tell you, it's just usually not one disease or one ailment we're dealing with. So we're dealing with the one that needs the most immediate effect. You need the benefit immediately. And then what you start to see is an overall wellness occur, and you're wondering, well, why do I feel better? Because you are actually treating the one illness that you wanted to, but also all the underlying ailments that she mentioned and all those different systems in your body. And so you're achieving overall health, wholeness. And so that healing in itself is going to change the dynamic of who you are. So from there, that's where you'll start to say, okay, I benchmark my progress. Now, how can I improve that treatment plan? Can I try a strain that will also address other things that I might need help with? So we do that in the dispensary on that level, and the doctor gives you that feedback.
Yeah, so in my practice, we practice integrative cannabinoid medicine. Integrative meaning that we combine the best of the conventional world and the Eastern world in natural medicine. We combine them together, okay? That's what integrative means. So if anybody says integrative medicine, that's what they're talking about. Eastern and Western philosophies merged into one. We base our practice, though, off of functional cannabinoid medicine. So our whole goal is to bring balance to that endocannabinoid system using cannabis, but other modalities, okay? Cannabis is not a magic bullet. As much as we want it to be a panacea, right, a cure-all, it is not. We have to pay attention to the whole body and what the whole body needs. If you're not putting the right fuel in your body, meaning water and food, and we are natural human beings, which means we should only be consuming natural whole foods. We don't put diesel in regular and let it tank and expect that car to run. I don't know why we think we're gonna run off McDonald's. We're not, okay? We need to put natural whole foods in our body. So if you think that cannabis is gonna cure your colon cancer, but you're not adjusting the way you eat, you're sadly mistaken. Yes, we heard about a brownie that you can use for lung cancer. Do not do it. Cancer is fueled by sugar. If you're a type 2 diabetic, you better not be reaching for that sugary treat to treat your neuropathic pain in your feet. You're sabotaging your healing process. When it comes to cannabis medicine, again, I'm going to use that word intentional. You have to be very intentional about how you use it for your specific underlying condition. Also in the grand scheme of things, right? You may have cancer, but you might also have fibromyalgia, you might also have ADHD, you might also be on opioids and antidepressants, etc., right? We need to work with you in conjunction with cannabis and everything else we can sort of throw at you to help start peeling back all those layers so that we can take off those prescription drugs, which absolutely are preventing you from healing as well. So you mentioned CBT, absolutely. You can combine that with cannabis therapies, but that's also going to take educating more healthcare professionals in those sectors, right? Chinese medicine doctors, acupuncturists, all the various specialists in conventional medicine. We need to start recruiting one another into this space so that we can apply all the things that we know to the endocannabinoid system so that we can truly have an integrative cannabis wellness market and field.
So, Chanda wants to say, you get 3 answers. And you want to transfer. I'm just saying. So,
Okay, I wanted to just address what you said because you mentioned that you want to know how we are going to help destigmatize it. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm working with these 2 young ladies as well as a team of people to provide training. And part of that will be patient and community training. So it's wonderful to give that information to the patients who come into the dispensary, but we're missing 99% of the population who don't, number one, know that it's legal, they don't know that's an option, but they don't have the education to know that cannabis can help treat these illnesses. And so that's what I do. I work with, for example, in Maryland, a network of dispensaries, and part of what we're going to be doing as the dispensaries start to open in Maryland is doing community education. To number one, educate the community that this is a medicine. Our patients range in age from 5 to 95. We want them to understand that we are talking about treating patients with medicine and all the different conditions that will be treated. Because whether or not they're going to be a patient of the dispensaries, they all need to have this education, and that starts to destigmatize it. So they won't look at people, when they think of a marijuana dispensary coming into their community, they're not thinking about the cannabis users. They're understanding that these are patients. So we have to take this education to the community so that they understand that. And I think that is where we will start to destigmatize it.
So I know you want to ask a second question, but I'm also, in the interest of time, there's a sister right behind you that has a question. If you think that your question can be answered in 30 seconds or less, you have an opportunity, or behind door B, you can find the individual once we're done and ask your question specifically to them. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Hi. I'm Macias. So my name is Tori. I'm with a nonprofit, a penny nonprofit called We Bake, called We Bring Awareness and Knowledge, Educating Demographics. And my question is, this is nice. I really, really like it. But what about the people that couldn't afford the $25 that need to know this information?
Where's the microphone? I'm located at 1718 Connecticut Avenue, Northwest Washington, D.C., level T. Come in anytime between 11 and 7:30, 7 days a week, and I will give you everything you need.
You are so awesome, because let me tell you something, Dr. Garcia. It's so funny because where I come from is the real DC, where we have hood PTSD, but we don't know it. And the reason why we don't know it is because we're scared, because we have this stigma in our household that tells us, don't go talk to a doctor about your family. So now the question is, this is nice, but how do we reach out to them and let them know, wait a minute, you're not really recreating. You're medicating.
That's it.
How do we get them to understand that? Because I can talk to them black and blue in the face, but then you'll hear a word like drug dealer. You'll hear a word like criminal. You'll hear a word like ashamed and illegal. You'll hear a word like we'll kick you off of campus. So my question is, what do we do to let people know it's okay? Because we can get a card in DC, but remember, there's not a lot of people like me left due to gentrification and the people that are being killed in our communities. There's not a lot of people like that. So when you tell us to get a medicinal card that you make us pay, I don't know, $200, $250 for, that we really can't afford anyway, you then tell us to give up our right of Fourth Amendment to bear arms. So now we're out there being naked. What do you suggest?
One of the biggest things that we're doing is bringing it to the community, because I think like forums like this is sort of preaching to the choir, and that's been my frustration with this space for over 7 or 8 months. I want to take it to where we are. One of our biggest gathering places is in the church, but I'll take it to the streets, I'll take it to the church, I'll take it whatever, because it's important for our community that we're educated about this plant and we do something from hood PTSD. And even like in my wheelhouse, football players, I know a lot of guys that are smoking, and they're trying to relieve their stress that they're under from, and some of the physical things that they're under playing that game. So I want to take it to wherever the people are. Insofar as the pricing goes, there are nonprofit cannabis organizations that definitely give you a break on the pricing if you can afford it. You just have to find them. But we're coming to you, because we have to educate our community.